Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is cut. Before we look at some of the definitions, I want to note that there are many different ways to use this verb. We're not going to be able to discuss them all, or this could turn into an hour-long video, but I've tried to identify some of the more common ways you might hear the verb cut used, or that you might see when you're reading. Let's look at some of those common meanings. The first is to make an opening in something with a sharp-edged tool or object. For this particular definition, you might think of surgery and the process of having doctors and other team members maybe making an opening or cutting a certain part of your body in order to put something in or take something out. A second meaning for cut is to divide into pieces with a knife, or other sharp tool. For this particular definition, I think of cooking and the fact that I might cut some potatoes or cut some carrots into pieces to later cook. A third meaning for this verb cut is to trim or reduce the length of something. So with this, the point is not so much that you are creating different pieces, but that you're really trying to shorten something. A fourth way we use the verb cut is to make or form something by removing material. So one thing that came to mind with this definition is hearing instructions of cut a hole, so in the process of making something. Cut is an irregular verb. If I make the progressive tense, I need to add another T to the end before I add ing. And that's because this verb is spelled consonant, vowel, consonant. So the progressive form is cutting. What makes this an irregular verb, though, is the past tense and participle forms of the verb. They don't change. It's cut. Same pronunciation, same spelling, and that's, again, going to be true if we're talking about past, present, or our participle form. Have cut, has cut. It all stays the same. Next, let's talk about some phrasal verbs. And from the notes on the screen, you might realize, wow, there's going to be more than just one set of phrasal verbs here. We're going to do two today. And I'll talk a little bit about the different verb tenses I'm using in my examples as we go along. Again, I want to note this is not every single phrasal verb with cut that exists. I've tried to pick out ones that I think might be more common for you to either hear or see when you're reading. The first phrasal verb we're going to look at is cut across. And I've also included the phrasal verb cut through in this particular section because they really have the same meaning. And that meaning is to go across, or we could say through, a place rather than going around it. And the reason someone is cutting across or cutting through is generally to be faster, to shorten the distance to a second location. Here's an example of that. If we cut across the parking lot, we'll be home in 5 minutes. So again, that's getting to it will be shorter and or faster for us to go this way. Cut across can have another meaning, and that meaning is to affect people of different groups. And my example sentence is something that I've actually seen used in various articles over the last month or so. Racism cuts across class lines. And here, the idea of class lines is essentially the differences between poor and rich. So kind of talking about economics as well. And this sentence is suggesting that racism affects poor people as much as it affects rich. This sentence is in the simple present. I can tell, again, because of that S on the end of the verb there. Let's move to the next phrasal verb. And again, I grouped two together that have pretty similar meanings, and that's to cut back on or cut down on. And both of these can mean to reduce or to consume less. I've got two examples of this. Airlines cut back on the number of flights due to the pandemic. Another example, he's cutting down on junk food. The second sentence is really just a way to suggest that someone is trying to eat less. That goes to that meaning of consume less or reduce how much junk food that person eats. You can see there, we've got a present progressive there. I've doubled my T before adding ing. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is cut in, and it means to interrupt. Here it is in a question. May I cut in with a question? So here I'm asking for permission to interrupt. Another phrasal verb you might hear is cut it out. And really, its meaning is to end or stop a bad behavior. So here's how you might hear it used. Are you pinching them? Cut it out. So imagine a parent perhaps talking to a child, describing that action of kind of taking your two fingers and squeezing someone else's skin, the pinching, right? Doesn't feel good. You want people to stop, right? So you would give them the command, cut it out. Next set of phrasal verbs we're going to look at is cut off. And this is going to have 4 different meanings that we'll look at more closely. The first way you might see cut off used is to mean to block or stop the supply of something. Here's an example of that. The flood has cut off many towns. So imagine a particular community that's maybe survived or surrounded by rivers or other bodies of water. Water rises, starts blocking the roadways, and the town is not able to get, people in the town, I should say, are not able to get to other towns. So they have been blocked. Another way sometimes this meaning of cut off is used might be to refer to electricity, right? The supply of electricity has been stopped or cut off. Cut off could also mean to interrupt. Here's an example of that. She cut me off before I could apologize. So here, I was interrupted before I could say I'm sorry. A third way to use cut off is to remove something from something bigger. Here's an example. He'll cut the tags off before he wears it. That sentence is using a little bit of future to his prediction. Maybe it's a promise that action will be complete before the action of wearing. The fourth way we're going to look at using cut off is to drive in front of another car suddenly. This has a pretty negative connotation to it. This is one reason we try and use blinkers on our car to let other cars know where we're headed and in what direction. But let's look at an example of cut off in a sentence. That car cut the truck off and nearly caused an accident. So someone in a car moves suddenly in front of the truck, and perhaps the truck had to jam its brakes or swerve and so as not to hit the car. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is cut out, and it means to remove something small from something larger. Here's an example. My mom cut the recipe out of the newspaper. So you're frequently going to hear cut out or cut out of in reference to magazines, newspapers, other larger documents where someone might want to save a small piece or portion of something. The last phrasal verb we're going to look at is cut up, and it means to cut into small pieces using scissors. Here's an example of that. The students cut the paper up into various shapes. So here, maybe we're talking about squares, circles, triangles. We're going to skip using different verb tenses today with cut, since we had so many phrasal verbs, but we'll still talk about some words that are related to our verb cut. And we're going to start with the noun form of this word. It has the exact same pronunciation and spelling as the verb. And just like the verb, it also has many different meanings. The first meaning we'll look at is a reduction in amount or size. Here's an example of that. Managers took a 20% pay cut. So this is actually a phrase I've heard quite a bit in the news lately in reference to what's happening in various jobs and workplaces due to the pandemic. People are being asked to reduce their wages to help the company have enough money to continue operating. A second meaning for cut refers to a piece of meat. So we might be talking about different cuts. Here it is in a sentence. That's a great cut of beef. A third meaning for the noun cut is a long, narrow opening. Here's an example of that. Next, make a 2-inch long cut into the material. So this sentence sounds like directions or instructions for some kind of project, right? One reason we can tell that this is being used as a noun, we've got that description coming right before it. A 2-inch long cut helps us know that it's being used as a noun. The last way we're going to look at cut as a noun being used is a bit of slang. And it's a share of profits from something. So here's an example of it. What's my cut for helping sell the car? Right? So in this particular sentence, someone has offered some help, right? They kind of want to know, what are you going to pay me for the help I provided? Next, we're going to keep looking at this same word, cut, but now it can also be an adjective, right? And its meaning as an adjective is divided into pieces or separated by cutting. So here it is in a sentence. Put the cut flowers into a vase. So I think it's pretty common to hear this adjective used to describe flowers or diamonds, other jewels that perhaps have been divided into pieces, separated or shaped in a particular way. The last word we're going to look at today is haircut. So this is a compound word that you can probably guess what it means, right? We've got hair, right? And then cut. And as a noun, right, it is the act of cutting a person's hair. Here it is in a sentence. I really need a haircut. And that's a true statement. Like many people who've probably been avoiding going to barber shops and salons due to the pandemic. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.